Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter, and with me today, hopefully, is Isandring. Isandring, how are you?
Fingers crossed.
Fingers, yeah, exactly. It's always interesting, because of the nature of your work. It means you're much more available than most people who would try to do a show like this. But having said that, it also means your internet connection is the reliability. Wow, is can be spotty. It can be interesting. So. You're roboting a little earlier. Hopefully we'll stick around. Thank you all for joining us. So, a couple of interesting things to discuss, and I think Sandy, there's a discussion going on in the live chat, and it's very true. If it bleeds, it leads. Depressing news sells, and it sells a lot better. So, I can see why. People tend to lean towards that, or channels tend to lean towards that. We try to be as balanced here as possible. I've certainly noticed the more dramatic shows, as it's like, we're all going to die, but you get more views. And the reality is you have to, we live in a capitalist society. Your channel is not going to succeed if it doesn't bring in something. So we are very thankful to our patrons and the people who support this channel, because that kind of support allows us to be more independent. So thank you to all of that. Having said that, we're going to discuss a lot of things today, and some of them are a little depressing, including I want to talk about Ukraine and what we're seeing there. It's this week is the second anniversary of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, which has been catastrophic, I think. My understanding is Afghanistan is now the only country in the world that does not permit women to over the age of 12 to get an education. I would think there are a few other countries, but apparently that's it. But and there's been a whole bunch else, and that deal was absolutely negotiated by Trump, designed to tank, I think, the next administration. That was Biden, who I don't know why he went through with it. But anyways, so thank you all for joining us. So let's actually start with, and we are going to cover Ukraine. I think that's important, and we've got some observations there. But let's actually, I don't know. Isandring, any thoughts? Do you want to start on Ukraine or Georgia, the coming Georgia indictment?
Oh, such great options to have for $500.
All right, you roboted there. I didn't quite catch that. It sounded like you were saying the Georgia indictment. Now, actually, before we start, I will say one other thing really quickly, which is my wife was in Spain. She loves flamenco. She's been doing flamenco dance for a while, and had an opportunity to learn in Spain with a guy. I've never heard of this guy. Apparently, he won an Oscar for dancing. And, so she had an opportunity to take a week of classes over there. She just got back. It was absolutely delighted. It meant I was with the kids for a week. They didn't have summer camp, so it was just me and them. Good news. I really decided to take that as an opportunity.
I am shocked you all survived.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like, I think she expected to come home and it would be The Simpsons, right? I'd be wearing a, a paper bag, like one of the grocery bags. I'd be wearing that for pants, and I think that's what she expected. And we won't say how close we got to that, but we weren't quite at that stage. But I also took the opportunity because, they're getting older. My youngest is going into high school. It's like, holy shit. It's like 4 more years and they're gone. And I want to get to know them as much as I can. So we spent a lot of time. We went to petting zoos and did the whole 9 yards. So that was a lot of fun.
And they let you go?
I know. After the last incident with the petting zoo with the salt lick and the whole, it was an ugly mess. There was a lot of misunderstandings. So Jesus. So anyways, so that's another reason why we've been a little disengaged for the last week. I've been a little disengaged, been busy, but my wife brought this back, which is, she brought this back from Spain. It's this knife. It's got a gorgeous, So I put a picture of this on the Discord, but I'm gonna put this in the background. Everything in the background has significance somewhere, somehow, somewhere. So I don't know where I'm gonna put this, but it's absolutely gorgeous. And so she gave me that.
Aren't you happy that we have a Second Amendment that protects your right to keep and bear arms?
Oh, for fuck's sake! Oh, okay,
so
ladies and gentlemen, let's see. Okay, 8 minutes. 8 minutes, folks. We were 8 minutes into the show before he had to mention the Second Amendment. I'm disappointed he's roboting because that denies me
every once in a while.
I'm disappointed you're roboting, and that denies me the ability to just hit the mute button. It's not nearly as salient if you just cut yourself off. But okay. Oh dear Lord. Yeah, I'm gonna have to see what it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's actually really a quality piece. Oh yeah, same thing. Toledo, Spain. Yep, I got it right. That's right on the hilt there. So yeah, you called it. All right. So we're gonna continue on with Mr. Second Amendment, his life. So all right, let's talk Trump. So I've been getting very confused. I feel like I'm getting gaslit by the Fulton County District Attorney. They already returned. So everybody knows there is a grand jury out on in Fulton County. What most people seem to forget is there was one, February, that returned a recommendation of an indictment. We thought around February he was going to get indicted. I'm going to read a New York Times article from that grand jury. There hasn't been an indictment on that one. We don't know why. There's another grand jury. I do know that this grand jury is considering evidence from the actual physical tampering of the election, voting booths and the tabulation devices. That was not included in the first one, so I don't know if this is a new one. I don't know if there was a problem with the first one. Let's talk about the first one, because that one seemed very significant, and I'm wondering if he's holding on and he's gonna return indictments that are emerging of these. Now, a grand jury in Georgia does not actually return indictments. It's one of the few places, districts where they don't. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Jurisdictions that do not return indictments. They, in fact, return recommendations for an indictment, and the indictment is brought up by the DA. And the reason that distinction is important is every time Trump says, oh, well, in Florida, the DA is going after me. The DA didn't indict you. A grand fucking jury indicted you. Those are two very different things. And just because the DA wants you 6 feet under, which he may or may not, who the fuck knows, but even if he does, doesn't mean he can do it, because specifically it has to be a grand jury, and there are very good reasons for that. So, let's see. A grand jury was investigating election interference by Donald J. Trump and his allies in Georgia, recommended indictments for multiple people on a range of charges in its final report, most of which remain sealed. And this was, this was February 21st. It's not a short list, meaning the indictments said the forewoman Emily Kohrs. Kohrs declined to name the people recommended for indictment since the judge had decided to keep it secret. But when asked if the indictment included Mr. Trump, Kohrs replied, quote, "You're not going to be shocked. It's not rocket science. What is it? Okay, I'm doing this from memory because it's not in here, so this is not a direct quote, but I recall her having said, the people that you're going to see on the indictment is exactly the people you'd expect to see. It's not going to be some giant plot twist. You're probably going to have a fair idea of what may be there. All right, so that's it. That was... Okay, yeah, okay, Atlanta, yeah, in Atlanta, Georgia. So that's it. So that's going back. So why there's another grand jury, I don't know. Nobody's explained this. I haven't heard anything in the news about it, and everyone's acting as if the grand jury that's out right now is the first one. No, there's already been a call for indictment. So I'll be honest, I've been looking very hard to find why this second one and what's going on with that, and I can't find anything. The first one seemed rather significant, so it's been 6 months since then, and nothing's happened. So I don't know what's going on. What I do know is that the former lieutenant governor of Georgia is going to be testifying tomorrow. I have to believe that that's going to take all day. They've got a few more people that are going to have to testify, so it's possible it's going to be by the end of the week, but it's certainly not going to be tomorrow. We'll get another indictment. We've talked about that. Any thoughts, Isandring?
I wonder how Trump expects to actually run a campaign when he's got all of these indictments going after them. The cost, I mean, he's spending all of the money that people are donating to him on his legal bills. Like I don't understand why people are still supporting him.
So Trump's going to be the first president to be running the country from jail and pardon himself. Yeah, except he can't pardon himself for Georgia, and Georgia's more likely to throw him in jail. The general consensus is that Georgia, okay, FYI, Georgia is really fucking pissed at him. As upset as all of us are about the various shenanigans that he's done, Georgia's really pissed at him. I think even people who would otherwise have supported him are very pissed about, he's talking about taking their voting machines and talking about, I think they were really pissed about what's come out about what he did in Georgia. So of all the groups that are pissed at him, I think the number of people who want to see him in jail is highest in Georgia. And I think law enforcement in Georgia is really rip-shit pissed at him. So my inclination is they are going to make him do a perp walk. They're going to mugshot him. That's my guess. I've been wrong on that one before, but I think that's the case because I think they are not pleased with him there. And he cannot pardon that. That's a Georgia thing. That's not federal government, so he can't do anything about that. If he loses in Georgia on any of the charges that we're expecting, he also cannot be on the ballot in Georgia. So if he's not on the ballot in Georgia, it's very hard to see how he's going to win the election. Having said that, this could take longer than the election. So if he loses the day after the election, if he loses in Georgia, he may still get back into office. So I'm extremely cautious to remind people that this is not over and he hasn't lost yet. But, at least there's a path to him not even being eligible, but we're just not there yet. So we'll see. Out of curiosity, Isandring, what do you? Let's assume for a second, nightmare scenario, he wins again. I got to tell you, the last time he won, my wife came to me genuinely saying we should move out of the country. She has a PhD in biochemistry. So France, any number of other countries started saying, hey, if you've got an advanced degree, we will move you to this country. And it's really fucking sad. It's really fucking sad that we live in the United States, ostensibly the most powerful country in the world and the greatest country, so on and so forth. And we are terrifying all the intellectuals who want to leave. Last country to do that in any significant quantity was Germany, who forced Einstein out. You know what Einstein did when he left? Helped make the nuclear bomb that destroyed Germany. Didn't destroy Germany, but you get where I'm going with that. So I don't like the idea of us forcing intellectuals out. What in your mind happens if Trump wins again?
Well, you'll get all of the Trumpsters, which I'm really am believing is dangerously close to an actual cult. You'll have to listen to their smugness for the next 4 years, and which will be annoying, and probably not so great thought out policy, because he's going to be more about trying to get revenge on people. I think that the administration ends up being a mess. I don't think they're going to be able to put out much of anything coherent, and the kinds of things that he can do as the head of the executive could be very damaging. And I just see him being spiteful enough to do it. And he's even being egged on by his, real hardcore supporters that he needs to go in and just literally fire everyone. Pretty much everybody in the executive branch, just fire them all. And so yeah, I don't see anything productive coming out of that, but the potential for quite a lot of upheaval is pretty significant, I believe.
Well, and he said he's going to, if he gets back in, first thing he's going to do is dismantle oversight over the executive branch. And the reason is because it's all been abused and yada, yada, yada. And his goal is going to be to consolidate power for the executive. But this is exactly what we see tyrants say when they come in. It's like, well, everybody wants to get me, so we have to eliminate all the oversight. I mean, that's what Netanyahu's doing.
And he's going to both simultaneously dismantle the FBI because it's a crooked organization.
Yes.
Run by a bunch of mid-level bureaucrats that aren't elected. And yet at the same time, he's going to direct the FBI and Department of Justice to go after, Joe Biden and his son. So I have no idea which one of those is going to work out, because I can't imagine you can do both at the same time. I mean, like I said, I don't think you're going to be able, it's going to be chaos. And I don't think that you're going to be able to get anything coherent out of it. And the fact that he doesn't have to worry about re-election again. So, there's nothing tempering anything that he's a lame duck. There's nothing tempering anything that he may want to do. And, he strikes me as very much a petulant child and vindictive on top of it. So I think it's going to be a lot of chaos.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's hope. The Georgia DA, yeah. So what I'm looking at here is it looks like the Georgia DA is expecting this to go to the grand jury sometime this week. They probably have a pretty good idea of what the grand juries. In order for a grand jury to return an indictment, or in this case, a recommendation for an indictment, the bar is really fucking low. So it doesn't usually take a huge amount of deliberation because the bar is so low, and they give easily enough to clear it. They don't tip their whole hand, but they give enough to clear it. They don't like there being questions about whether or not the grand jury can return an indictment. So, this is probably as soon as it goes to the jury. I mean, it'll be back in 4 hours, and we'll know. So, all right. So we're gonna stay on that one. Actually, let's go to the wildfires next. And I think one of the things that we're starting to have to talk about is habitability on this planet. And we don't often think about it. We think of the planet Earth as being habitable for us, and that's actually not entirely true. There are huge swaths that are, or there are large swaths that are habitable. There are huge swaths that are not habitable. Now, when I say habitable, what I mean is we can live without the assistance of technology, so long as we have basically food, clothing, whatever, water. We can live naturally in the environment. Obviously, the oceans are not habitable. We can't live underwater without significant assistance. So naturally, the oceans are not habitable. Anything over I think it's about 20,000, 22,000 feet is not habitable. The death zone on Mount Everest is, I think, 22,000 feet and above. And what that basically means is at 22,000 feet, you are now dying. You can survive at 22,000 feet with oxygen. If you're taking supplemental oxygen, you can survive at 22,000 feet for about 2 weeks. But the problem is the pressure is so low, your blood can't actually sustain enough oxygen to keep you alive, even if you're taking pure oxygen. So you are starting to die at 22,000 feet. That is not a habitable zone for human beings. You have to get some kind of significant assistance if you're going to survive for any period of time at 22,000 feet or higher. So those zones obviously aren't habitable. 112 is considered the temperature at which, the maximum temperature at which human beings can survive. That's it, 112. If it's 112 degrees, it doesn't matter how much water you get, doesn't matter how much food you get, you will die eventually at 112. And there's variability based on human beings, but 112 is usually considered. So if it's over 112, you're going to need some kind of assistance to survive that temperature. Last week, it hit 147 degrees in parts of Iran, 147 degrees. If you have enough water, and if you are a healthy human being, you can survive in 147 degree temperature for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's it. That's it. We have the wildfires that we've been seeing. We have obviously changes to the habitability zones of planet Earth, and we seem to be losing a number of them. And what we don't realize or we don't think about is there's actually there's a lot of Earth that's already not habitable. The oceans takes out 2/3 of the planet that we actually can't live in. When you take into account deserts, anything over 112, where we cannot live without some form of assistance, there's already not as much habitable zones on this planet as we like to think. Any thoughts on the what we've been seeing in regards to the changing temperature, climate, the fires in particular? And I do want to talk about the fires, so if you want to jump onto that, go right ahead. What are your thoughts, Isandring?
Oh yeah, we're seeing particularly egregious examples of fires in Hawaii right now. We're talking about fires all over the place, not just in Hawaii, and those fires are wiping out large sections of habitable areas as well, because human beings and fire don't coexist well together. At least wildfires don't. I mean, the tamer version of campfire usually we do okay with. Although there's plenty of drunk regnuts that have fought with the campfire and lost. You're going to see these different shifting patterns. You're going to see a lot of the climates, subclimates, like subtropical, tropical, those are going to start shifting around. And, things keep going on the same kind of path of all these different changes. The areas in which people live now are going to become uninhabitable, and areas in which almost nobody lives now is where people are going to start moving. And you're going to start seeing quite a lot of refugee drift across the entire world, trying to get to areas where you can actually survive. And the question is can we, technology our way out of this faster than we're falling into it? And at the moment, it appears no. But I mean, Fermi paradox is there for a reason.
Well, and one of the bigger problems, of course, that we really don't have a technological solution to is food. It takes a while to grow crops. It takes a while to start a whole brand new set of crops in a brand new area, even if that area is stable, which none of these areas are going to be for a while. So if we start to see habitable zones shift, yeah, you may see new zones open up that are ideal for farming. But they're going to be in places we didn't expect. They're going to be in places we don't have the infrastructure, and places where there are no farmers right now. And meanwhile, crops across the planet are going to be getting burned up and dying because of the changing climate. So it's like we're going to lose a huge number of crops before we've had time to adapt and move to areas that are now going to be suitable for farming. Many areas of which, by the way, I mean, again, since they haven't been suitable for farming, if all of a sudden, what used to be a desert, let's say Death Valley suddenly becomes a zone that's ideal for growing wheat and all these other things. It's still all sand because it's been a desert for so long. It doesn't have the soil to do that kind of farming because it's never been habitable for that kind of farming before. So the number of technological issues that we have to overcome in order to adapt to this seems to me to be rather staggering.
Yeah, that's why I said it doesn't appear that we're going to be able to technology our way out of this, or science our way the hell out of this, as the Martian would say. And that's going to be a huge problem because, we're going to start seeing depleted resources, especially food. I mean, Russia trying to take out as much grain as possible isn't helping either. And that's going to get worse, because not only are people going to start moving out of areas that they can no longer survive in and start moving into other areas, but at the same time, you're going to have limiting resources are going to start cropping up. And so now you're going to see third world nations not have enough food to actually feed all of their people, and you're going to start seeing a lot of unrest, and small countries, poor countries start, the governmental structures collapsing there because they can't keep a handle on all the civilian unrest that there is in the country because they're slowly starving to death. And you want to talk about a world war, we talk about World War I and World War II, but they're not particularly apt. I mean, I guess from the Eurocentric point of view that they were actual world wars because, the countries that mattered were involved. But we're talking about like a true world war, like war everywhere humans live, because you're going to see, again, masses of refugees fleeing certain areas, trying to get into other areas. You're going to have richer countries are going to be trying to gobble up any land that's arable and looks like it's going to be productive. And you're going to see a whole bunch of fighting over resources, starting with the poorer nations first. But it will eventually trickle up, and the Chinese curse is absolutely in play here. That will become a very, very interesting time, and not in a good way.
Well, and there's going to be a lot of hands, too. That's the other Chinese. May you have many hands. All right. Let me just see here. All right. So, well, and we've got somebody pointed out, too, and I mean, there's so many other issues. It's like they've realized, so Chicago, the buildings in Chicago are not suffering any destabilization yet, but it looks like they may because Chicago is sinking. You get, whenever you place any kind of building, it applies a tremendous amount of pressure to the earth below it. So you have to have a stable earth, but there's always some settling and there's always some sinking. But in Chicago is sinking faster than anticipated. And we are expecting to see a lot more of that in major cities because the temperature of the ground is changing, and the density of the ground changes when the temperature changes, and the amount of water in the ground changes as the density changes. So all of a sudden, assumptions that we had when building entire cities are no longer true. So the consequences of this is we're only starting to take a look at and see. And it's difficult because we saw so much of this coming, and to see that not only have we not really succeeded in making as much headway as we need to, but we're still not succeeding. I mean, the argument that all of this is natural climate change is still very dominant. I mean, there are people who sit there and say, well, of course the environment's changing. We've been saying that it's changing and getting warmer, but this is the natural climate change. It's like, yeah, that's like what? 10 degrees in 10,000 years. How many degrees are we getting in 10 years now? It's not the same thing. But I don't know. Is that what you've been hearing about natural climate change, or what are you the so-called climate deniers? Yeah. What have you been hearing?
I'm not hearing nearly so many people that are just outright claiming that no, it's not getting hotter. I've still been seeing some people that are trying to quote different, apparently studies. Some of them I couldn't find. Some of them I just didn't have time to read. Talking about how, this global warming thing, everything's getting hotter, and yet there's been zero loss of the ice in Antarctica. And then you see all these other people that are quoting studies that I absolutely could get a hold of and actually read that are like, no, actually they're losing. It's like the ocean ice shelves are rearranging and moving around, and the total overall amount may not be changing significantly, but the overland ice sheet is thinning. And so there's a huge section there that they're not even trying to take into consideration. So it's like I've been seeing some of that where people are still trying to deny that the climate is really changing at all. But I'm seeing less and less in that, and more of the, well, sure, things are changing, but of course everything's changing. That's the most popular line now. It's like, how much is humans really affecting this? And they're skeptical about how much human activity is actually driving this. And then I am seeing people that are more shifting into, okay, yes, anthropomorphic climate change is a real thing. It's like, I don't think we can really deny that anymore. But the big problem is there's nothing we can really do about it, because third world countries aren't going to change what they're doing. China isn't going to change what they're doing. India isn't going to change what they're doing. The United States and all of Europe together cannot do this alone. There literally is nothing we can do about it except start looking for looking for technological innovations to try and help. Like, let's start sucking carbon out of the air with large vacuum cleaners, and try and capture that carbon to sequester it away somewhere else. And So, I am seeing a slow shift in that direction, with fewer just outright denying anything's wrong. And then, more people are accepting, okay, humans are definitely causing this. But there's still that fatalistic, but there's nothing that we can do because we cannot convince the whole world that it's enough of a problem when half the world is going, yeah, well, we're concerned about living through tomorrow and next week. I don't give a shit what's going to happen in 50 years. So things are shifting, but I'm not sure that they're shifting for the better.
Literally breaking news from 2 minutes ago. 2 minutes ago. Associated Press, quote, judge sides with young activists in first-of-a-kind climate change trial in Montana. A Montana judge on Monday sided with young environmentalist who said that the state agencies were violating their constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment by permitting fossil fuel development without considering its effects on the climate. The ruling, a first of its kind trial in the U.S., adds to a small number of legal decisions around the world that have established that a government duty to protect citizens from climate change. District Court Judge Kathy Seeley found the policy the state uses in evaluating requests for fossil fuel permits which do not permit agencies to evaluate the effects of greenhouse gas emissions is unconstitutional. So that's interesting. Sandy, I have zero empathy right now. We were warned back in this, and 70 people can't do enough. Yeah, I got to tell you, I've been getting a little fatalistic, and I've been getting a little, and in part, it's the war in Ukraine, because we cover that a lot, and it's like, that's genocide. And to watch what Russians are doing, and to watch Russians who aren't paying any attention, or who don't give a shit about the reality of it, come out and say, well, it's denazification, and the Ukrainians deserve this, and to see people fighting for their homes and dying in the numbers. So between that and the climate change numbers, it's been sort of like, yeah, I've been less impressed with the human species recently, and much more sort of like, if we have the information and we know this is happening and we're too bothered to actually try to do anything about it. But I think that's a whole nother show. I think that's empathy. And yeah, you were talking about what's it called? The Fermi paradox.
The Fermi paradox. Why don't we see advanced star-bearing civilizations or star-faring civilizations all over the place? We should look at the trillions upon trillions of stars and planets that are out there. We should be able to see. Plus, at low estimate, 13 something billion years. Apparently, there's some new information that suggests that the universe may even be older than that, up to maybe even 70 billion years.
Jesus.
But yeah, I wanted to read that article. I was only able to really kind of catch many of the headlines of it, but so I haven't had a chance to look at it. But apparently something came out where it's like, the age may be revised upwards, but the long-held age has been somewhere around 13.6 billion years. It's like we should see civilizations out there all the time. I mean, look at how long it took us to go from planting crops in the ground and actually beginning to build civilization to landing people on the moon, putting up entire satellite infrastructure, sending probes to other planets and other moons to investigate. It's like that wasn't a very long time in the galactic scheme of time. So we should see these civilizations all over the place, and we don't. So the Fermi paradox talks about why is that the case. Either we kill ourselves off, or life is so incredibly rare that even with the trillions upon trillions of opportunities to arise, I should say intelligent life, or what we would consider intelligent life, it's only occurred maybe a handful of times, and only one that we know of. So that's what the Fermi paradox deals with.
Did you say Fermi paradox?
We seem to be getting the answer.
Did you say, well, and that's
Fermi
what
paradox.
Yeah. So
Fermi.
Oh no, I know, but it sounded like you swapped the letters on the last.
Paradox.
Paradox. So when Stephen Hawking was asked about what would happen if aliens showed up, he said, well, it's the same thing as when, Europeans showed up and met the Native Americans, would all get wiped out, so on and so forth. I strongly disagree. Very strongly disagree. Here's why. I think in order to survive that paradox, we would have to have enough empathy that our ability to the prefrontal cortex would have to be larger than our adrenal glands, which is difficult because you need the adrenal glands to get to the point where you've survived a harsh planet long enough that you can start to use the prefrontal lobes. But if your compassion is not high enough, and if your ability to empathize and predict the future and to empathize with the suffering of others is not high enough, then you ignore potential threats to the entire species, like climate change. You ignore potential threats. You're more likely to detonate nuclear weapons in a bid to show who's got the biggest whatever. And so in order for a species to survive the stage that we're in, it seems to me you would have to have an ability to empathize with others sufficient that you would say, okay, I want to and can deal with larger global community threats that don't necessarily affect me right now. And our inability to do that en masse is our biggest threat right now. It's our inability to accurately respond to future threats as opposed to current immediate ones, which is one that you've talked about a lot, that we're better at responding to problems than we are anticipating and eliminating them before they become a problem.
Well, I mean, it's not even so much an anticipation issue either, because there's plenty of people that have anticipated exactly what's going to happen, or at least a good approximation of what's going to happen, both at a low end and at an extreme end. So I mean, we've got that pretty nailed down. The problem is acting upon it. It's like, we're creatures that evolved to live in the now and care about our survival in the now, and to not be particularly worried about it. Now, as our brains developed, we gained the ability to start thinking ahead into the future, delaying gratification. All of those things came with a more complex brain, and these are some of the emergent properties. Geez, I can talk today, I swear. Emergent properties that have come out of this complex mass of gray matter up here. The problem is that all of our base biological structures are still evolved to deal with today and not be particularly concerned with tomorrow. So I'm not sure how we overcome that, because we still tend to default to, well, I care about tomorrow, and I realize that the actions that I'm taking today to make to allow my family and stuff to survive are going to doom us in 100 years. But it's the exact reason that things like payday loans exist. It's like, you are worse off when it comes to taking a payday loan, because at the end of it, you have less. But when you look in your child's eyes and says, why can't I eat today? Because I'm hungry, and I've been hungry all week, and I've only had 5 pounds of meat in the last month. It's like, how do you? So we're motivated a lot more emotionally, and we don't deal with trying to solve future problems today when there's problems that we're dealing with today. So I don't know if we'll be able to overcome that.
All right. I still really want to talk about Ukraine, but we have breaking news. It's not quite what it looks like, but it's interesting. It looks like there was an error in the, welcome to In Time, folks. We've got something for you. Thank you very much, Dorito. He, snagged this. Well fucking done. Holy shit. The Georgia
There's
court
something
website.
On the screen and
Yeah, the Georgia court website inadvertently posted the charges. It looks like they have a number of charges. They haven't put them up yet. They're not supposed to be public yet, but this, what we're showing you right now, is from the Georgia County website. They appear to have inadvertently posted charges against Donald J. Trump filed today. So we're going to read them. This is not official.
Like the Supreme Court? Is it inadvertent, like the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, or is it an actual accident?
I suspect it's an actual accident. So what we're looking at, all right. So we snagged this in case Reuters takes it down, but we do have this. Okay, yeah. So we're going to break this down in just a minute, and I want to reiterate what we have, what we know, and what we don't know. And I'm actually going to need. I'm going to need to make a second copy of this. So we'll put this up on. This is already up on our Discord for anybody who wants to see it. Let me see if, okay, good. We've got it. So, yeah, this is, let me explain to you the situation that we have right now. As of an hour ago, a little less than that, one of the things that we told you was we are not anticipating the jury to come back with any indictments. We know that there are still 2 significant witnesses expected to testify this week, including the former lieutenant governor expected to testify tomorrow. Having said that, it appears, and this seems quite solid. Now, this is coming actually from Thomson Reuters. Reuters is reporting that the Georgia court website inadvertently briefly published the indictments against Trump. Now, they do publish these indictments. It seems to me that they were attempting to prepare for the indictments to go public and inadvertently publish them. But what that would mean is the indictments have already been returned, which is surprising unless this comes from that first case, which I told you before. There was actually already a all right, stand by one. That means so that we know that already there was recommendations for indictments. So this could be that he's getting hit with this charge and the other one is still out. I don't know how to reconcile us having this and what we know to a fair degree of certainty, which is that there's at least one more witness, actually at least 2 more witnesses set to testify. So I don't know how they've come down with this. Total
speculation here, but one thing that we could be looking at is, as you said, this is the charges from the first grand jury recommendations, and that they were holding those for 2 reasons. One, because they knew there was going to be a second one, and so they figured they would do all of them at once, publish everything at once, so they were holding on to that. They could have also been holding off to see what was going on with some of the other indictments instead of being the first to act on them. So they may have been holding off to see if they were actually going to publish them or not, and now they decided that we're going to. We have these, and as soon as we clear this up with the second one, since it's already ongoing, we're going to publish all of them.
All right, so let me, we're going to show you what we've got. So this is, I mean, and again, this is coming from Reuters. So it's a reliable source according to Reuters. Yeah, Dave, don't apologize. We were, so, as I said earlier, this is Dorito picked up on this unbelievable fucking snag. Well done. We were doing our week in review rundown, and we had just talked about the status of the second, what is the current indictment, grand jury on Trump, and Dorito published this. So again, this is in the Discord, so come join us on our Discord, and we were going to also talk about one of the special teams on Discord, and we'll discuss that in a minute. But so it looks like it's got a case number, it's got a court, it's got the whole 9 yards. So let's talk about what we are seeing here. My suspicion is, even though this doesn't seem to, it's very preliminary. Okay, so this looks like, almost just like a cover letter. So let's just see what we've got. This was filed today. It's got a case number. Defendant Donald J. Trump charges violation of the RICO Act, serious felony. Now, RICO is usually considered federal, but there are RICO equivalents at the state level. One of the interesting things about the Georgia RICO Act is that that act does not necessarily need there to be, all it requires is a conspiracy. It does not necessarily, there's a much higher, not much higher, but there's a higher bar for RICO at the federal level, which this would, at the federal level, this does not, RICO would not apply. It does here because at the state level in Georgia, their RICO law only necessitates a, basically a conspiracy to influence or corrupt a system. So like any kind of state or business or anything like that. So he's guilty, not guilty, sorry, he can be tried on RICO at the state level. Solicitation of a violation of oath by a public officer. That's a felony. So the RICO one's a serious felony. They have a separate category for serious felony. RICO, serious felony. Solicitation of violation of an oath by a public officer, felony. Conspiracy to commit impersonating a public officer. I have no idea where the fuck that comes from. Conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree. I know where that comes from. That's the, so they're going to hit him with, that's for the electors. That is the, and we know his campaign was involved. We know for a fact his campaign was involved. The question is, was he? And apparently they think they can prove he was. And again, they've gotten the electors, the fake electors, to flip. So if any of the fake electors name him as being involved, they've got him on conspiracy to commit forgery. Now, this is what I was expecting. Remember, I told you guys I had been expecting something much more detailed like this in the federal one, but instead they decided to go for these overarching. This is, they're going after everything at the detail level. Conspiracy to commit a false filing documents. Again, that's the electors. Forgery in the first degree, false statements and writings. The electors. This is all electors. Solicitation of violence. Jesus. False statements and writings. Okay, so yeah. Financial, is that a separate category of charge? Okay. So, all right. So, that's what we're looking at. That's absolutely now, there's a couple of things about this. This just looks like a cover letter. This doesn't get into it. So This is, yeah, I'm trying to figure out what this is. Again, this comes from Reuters. Let's see what Reuters has to say about this. But if so, I mean, this is, in some ways, this is what everybody's been looking for. Now, if he gets hit on violation of oath of a public officer, if he gets hit on impersonating, so let's see, if he gets hit, and I didn't read, are those the charges and counts? Okay. So he's one. Okay, I'm going to have to do the math as I go on this. This is, okay, because this is really poorly done. Yeah, it's not how many charges. It's not the total charges. Oh, yeah, it's the total charges, not the number per count. So, or sorry, per counts per charge. So, one count of violating RICO. 4 counts of, Jesus, of solicitation of violation of oath of a public officer, 4 counts of conspiracy to commit impersonating an officer, 2 counts conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree, 2 counts conspiracy to commit false statements writing, 2 counts conspiracy to commit false documents, 2 counts conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree, 2 counts conspiracy to commit false statements and writings, 8 counts of filing false documents, 1 count of solicitation of violation of an oath of a public officer, 1 count of false statements and writings, 9 counts of solicitation of violation of oath of a public officer. I don't know why they have those as separate counts or separate charges. It's the same charge. Why they haven't merged the counts, I don't know. And 1 count of filing false statements and writings. for a total of 39 counts. Yeah, okay, so it says charges, Trump, so, and then if you look, okay, so 1, 5, so it looks like they're totaling all of these up to get a total of 39 charges, or sorry, 39 counts, and I don't know how you want to break up the number of charges here, because some of these are the same charge, so I don't know how it works, but it says charges. Yeah, so these are charges. There's 39. So it's 39 counts. Yeah, 9 different officials. I mean, it really depends. So here's how they get so many officials. So we know already that he had talked with the state attorney trying to get them to flip, but he also tried to get people involved with the certification process to flip. That includes, at least we know of, one county clerk, one judge, so presumably they're including all of those. Each of those is a separate count. 30 years for each charge. Oh, yep. I think he's got it. I think you're right. I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah, that would make more sense. That has to make more sense, because then that would explain why they're repeating the charges. Okay, that would explain why they're repeating the charges. They're listing each count and each charge separately. So it's two counts of false statements and warnings, and you know that because they've listed that charge twice. Dorito has it. That is correct. I was wrong. Thank you for that. I think you got it. I think that's right. That's what makes the most sense. I'm having a very hard time reading this, but I think you got it. This is so poorly done. You can see his date of birth isn't filled out yet either, which is the only suspicious thing about this. Which is, and as suspicious again, I don't think it's fake, because if you were going to fake something like this, you'd actually put in the date of birth. And we're getting this from Reuters. So because I mean, and again, I'm going to see what Reuters has to say. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, so it's all actually really fucking serious, and if he gets convicted on any one of these, I think, let's see, with the possible exception of RICO, I don't know if he can be on the ballot with RICO, but the others I know, if he gets convicted of any of them, he can't be on the ballot. So none of these charges have been filed yet, or if they've been filed, we don't know. It hasn't been made public, but it looks like they're anticipating, and I'm going to read the Reuters article, but gaming with Robin, €6. I finally got that correct. Thank you. Aren't electors public officers? That's a good question. State electors, if they're state electors, no, I suspect they are not. Well, wait a minute. Okay, so they get sworn in. They are representatives of the state, but they're designated usually in at least 50% of the states, they're designated by the governor. I'll have to look into that. I don't know. That's a good question. But putting in the false electors wouldn't be, I mean, then each elector could be a count, but yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. We'll have to look into that. But at any rate, let's see what Reuters is saying about this. So, I mean, this is huge. This is a good insight early on into, oh, okay, yeah, thank you, Thomson Reuters. That's not what I was looking for. That's what I'm looking for. Georgia court website briefly removes document about potential Trump charges. The Fulton County, Georgia court's website briefly posted a document on Monday, that's what you're looking at now, listing several crimes against criminal charges, against former U.S. president that appeared to relate to his attempts to overturn the election before taking the document down without explanation. The office says that no charges have been filed against Trump. The document was dated August 14th, which is today, citing the case as open but is no longer available on the court's websites. Reuters was not immediately able to determine why the item was posted or removed. The Reuters report that these charges were filed is inaccurate. Beyond that, we cannot comment. All right. That tells us a lot. The fact that they're saying that they haven't been, and like I said, this isn't, you wouldn't file it. That's why there's any number of the fact that his birthday isn't that. This is a preparatory document. You couldn't file this. His date of birth is absent in it, and it wouldn't be organized like this. So, yeah, and they couldn't have filed yet. So it looks like, so my suspicion is this is actually all related to the current grand jury, and it's the anticipation of what they think they're going to get out of the grand jury, and they're preparing it so that once they get it, they can go live with it, and then somebody made a mistake and put that on. The reason I suspect that this has to be legit is because they didn't deny the whole thing. They just denied that the charges have been filed. So, and it's very hard to imagine that the Fulton County website just randomly posted a document that's meaningless. So, my suspicion is this is a real document, but it is not either a charging document or the actual filing of the charges. It's, I think, more of a summary that's being used in order to prepare for the charges which are expected at any time. The 2-page document cites violation of RICO, solicitation of violation of and conspiracy. All right, so this is all from Reuters. So that's what we've got. I mean, I think it's exciting and worth getting into it. It's this is ideally what we would want to see. So I'm optimistic if this is what they think they're going to get. Any final thoughts on this, Isandring, before we go on?
The plot thickens. You can't see me, but I'm like stroking my goatee.
Yep. So
it's going to be it's going to be an interesting coming year, and I don't know. I mean, there's people on the far left and people on the far right that both seem to want to like burn the system down. I'm shocked that they haven't gotten together yet to try and burn everything down, because if they did, they might be able to garner enough support that despite all of these charges, they could get Trump elected, because I think that would be the quickest way to burn down our different institutions, is to elect Trump. So let's hope they don't figure that out. Of course, there's a lot of animosity between those two groups, pretty far extremes away from each other. So I'm not sure if they'd be able to cooperate on anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so the last thing we wanted to discuss. So, and again, our Discord, we've got this pre-indictment documentation on our Discord. It's only 2 pages, but I think it's worth looking at. It's some pretty interesting charges. And like I said, Georgia is pissed at him, and you can tell just by looking at this, they're pissed at him. So, I'm looking forward to seeing when that actually drops. But having said that, so on our Discord too, we have a system set up for having what we call special teams. Groups, rooms set up with as much security as we can get on Discord for people to workshop various topics. And we put in people who, in some cases, shouldn't even be talking to us, dissidents from various countries or people who are fighting on the front lines, who are willing to talk to us about things that normally they wouldn't go public. And a lot of what those special teams produce, we can be guidance for us going forward. They're very useful, but a lot of it we can't talk about directly, at least. But it certainly informs our shows, and is part of how sometimes we get information ahead of everybody else, is the product of those special teams. And a lot of times nothing happens. You just see people shooting the shit, and they're good conversations, but we don't produce anything that's of value. But in one of these discussions for the last couple of weeks, what we've noticed is people on the front lines in Ukraine reporting conditions heading south. And the tenor that I've seen, the tone and tenor, has become much more pessimistic. and has suggested that things are worse than we have thus far believed they are in Ukraine, and the soldiers are aware of that, and that it's going to become pretty obvious at some point soon, if it's not obvious already. When Operator Starsky, who we have been blessed to be able to have on and talk to, and who, I consider a friend, and I love the guy. I think he's just an amazing human being. But when he got moved to the front lines, I took that actually as a very, very bad sign. I took that as a bad sign because one of the things Ukraine needs to win this war, and it absolutely needs it, is the support of Western countries, the support of NATO, and in particular the support of the U.S. And the only way it maintains that support is by having press officers who talk to people about it and who let people know what's going on. Starsky is one of those people, and he does a very good job. If he's being moved to the front, that suggests to me, I'm not an expert, but it suggests to me that things are going badly enough at the front that short-term survival goals, like just fighting the war, are taking precedence over long-term survival goals, like maintaining the support they need to win the war. That's what it suggests to me. Any number of things could have happened. We know that he's been wanting to be on the front for a while. He does his work as a press officer because he knows it's important and because he's been ordered to, and he does a very good job with it. But I think he's made it clear on more than one occasion he's very interested in fighting for his country. And I think, well, intellectually he's aware that that's exactly what he's doing when he comes on In Time and he comes on other programs. It's not what his unit is doing, and it's not what people he cares about are doing. And so, I think he's keenly aware of that. But it seems to me that this was done because they need more people in those areas, and they're drawing from deeper on the bench. And that's, I think, a bad sign. And us monitoring these discussions in the special teams has also been suggesting in that direction. So we've spoken with Lance, and we've spoken with a few other people, and the general consensus is a couple-fold. And we're going to talk. I think this is we're trying to figure out the framework for when we have Lieutenant General Ben Hodges back on, and what we're going to talk to him about. And I think what we're going to talk to him about is the long-term survivability. No, not the survival. Let me rephrase that. So I think what we're starting to form in these discussions is the idea that NATO does not want a Ukrainian victory in the same sense that Ukraine would consider a victory. NATO is not interested in expelling Russia from Ukraine. Rather, they're interested in giving Ukraine enough to survive, enough that they will not be wiped out by Russia, but not so much that they can defeat Russia, presumably with the goal that there is a negotiated settlement, and Russia, feeling that it hasn't completely lost everything, Putin gets to walk away with probably Crimea and or Donbass and declare victory. Ukraine has 2 huge swaths of it cut out permanently in a negotiated settlement with Russia, which they will violate within about 10 years, tops. And that's actually the goal of NATO. And having seen a number of these discussions and participated with it, I think I'm reaching the conclusion that I think that's probably accurate. So we're going to talk to Lieutenant General Ben Hodges and see if that's his view, and see if indeed he thinks that NATO is deliberately, while actually still genuinely supporting Ukraine, is deliberately limiting its support so that Russia can have at least a partial victory. That's hard for me to swallow, but I think the evidence that the Biden administration supports that plan is large enough. So we're getting some context for our discussion with Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. So, Isandring, what are your thoughts?
I think that's a pretty slimy thing to do if that's what's actually going on. It is all kind of speculation, and we probably won't know exactly what the motivations were behind many of these actions till long after the fact. But sometimes if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, well, you know the rest. So, it's one of the things that's never been a good situation for Ukraine is for a war of attrition to crop up, and that's what seems to be exactly what's happening. Russia has far more people that it can throw at this war than Ukraine does. And the reticence of NATO countries to really give it a lot of offensive weaponry that can strike into fairly deep into Russia. It's very difficult to win a defensive war, to end a war defensively. So the biggest hope was to be able to rout out the Russians quickly and get back to their borders, maintain and hold their borders against any future incursions. But as we've mentioned several times, one of the things that Russia can still do is keep lobbing mortars and missiles into the country, and they can do that for a very long time. So it feels really slimy to have that as a possible. Well, we want them to survive, but we don't want them to really win the war that they want to win. We want them to win the war that we want, which is stop Russia from advancing any farther, but surrender what Russia's already grabbed. And maybe there's high political stakes people that are sitting at the table going, look, how do we stop this from turning into a nuclear exchange in some way, shape, or form? And maybe they've decided that, look, this is really the only way, because if Russia gets to the point where it's just going to be a lose all the way around, they're not going to get any kind of win that they can even spin in their propaganda machines as being a win. Then it really kind of backs them into the corner of, well, now nuclear weapons are on the table, period. And if the United States or allied countries, NATO countries, were going to actually give the kinds of weaponry to Ukraine for them to really win, they need to give them stuff that can reach Moscow, and they can directly attack the Russians in their own country. And of course, Russia's already considered that to be a red line for them. So maybe that's just some high stakes political maneuvering. It still feels real slimy. It's like, if you're going to support a country, especially one that you pledge to support for giving up nuclear weapons, then you should do that and not play games like this with the lives of an entire country.
Well, and
we're going to have to wait and see what's going on.
It's not just that. I mean, it's amazing how many people deny the obviousness of what you just said. But to get even worse, of course, it's actual genocide being committed against Ukraine. This isn't just a war. The goal of Russia is to wipe the Ukrainian people off the face of the earth. And I don't think there's any way you could defensively argue that that's not what they're trying to do. I don't think there's a defensible position counter to that. That's what they're trying to do. So what I'm seeing is this, and we've been speaking with a number of people from people on the front lines to reasonably high level people associated with the war in Ukraine. And the general consensus that I am now hearing is that Ukraine can maintain this war at its current level for about one more year. That's it. And the problem is they don't have an infinite supply of men. They don't have an infinite supply of logistics. And while the ratio, or the casualty ratio, is in their favor, Russia can bring 10 times more people to the front than Ukraine can. So it not only has to be in their favor, but it has to be staggeringly high in their favor. That is achievable. They're not doing that right now, but it is achievable. But the only way it's achievable is with a full commitment from NATO, which NATO thus far has not given. So at its current levels, what I'm seeing is multiple people who are in a position to make this assertion, who are involved directly, this isn't Commander Lance McMillan, who, by the way, does echo the sentiment, but, he's not involved in the war. People who are involved in the war, what I'm hearing and seeing is that the estimation is at its current level, the current level of losses on the front, at the current level of the uses of ammunition and the current level of commitment from NATO to replenish ammunition and weapons, Ukraine has about 1 year of combat left. That's what I'm hearing. 1 year of combat left. Either NATO steps up or what? As much as and it's not easy to hear or say that. And that's not what anyone wants to hear. And I hope everybody who's saying that is wrong. But that's what I'm hearing from sources I trust and are credible. And I'm also hearing that nobody's talking about it because nobody wants to say that, because the more you say and talk about it, the more, morale is an important thing. And they need all the morale they can get. On the flip side, I think it's also important to discuss honestly what we're looking at. And that's what I'm seeing from this chair. I think we are to exactly what Ben Hodges has said and what any number of other people have said. NATO is going to have to commit to them winning the war, or else I think this isn't going to end the way anybody wants it to end. Ukraine isn't going to get wiped out, but Ukraine does not have the ability to. It's what you said. In a war of attrition, Ukraine will lose because Ukraine does not have the manpower. They have to beat it. They have to win some other way. That's why NATO has to commit. If NATO doesn't, they can continue for about a year. That's what I'm seeing, and it seems to me to be roughly accurate. So that's what we're looking at. That's not what anyone wants to hear, and I think the good news about facing that reality is now we know what to talk to Ben Hodges about, because he has been adamant that NATO has to step up their commitment, and I always sort of felt like he was probably kind of right. I wanted to see it, but I sort of felt like, Ukraine's doing fine, and Ukraine is going to win at the current commitment levels. So, hey, I'd love to see. NATO really should. NATO morally has an obligation to. It's best for everybody. It really is. The best thing for everybody is for Russia to completely lose this war. But I am reaching the realization that no, without increased support, not just without 100% commitment to all of their promises, I don't see Ukraine being able to get back all of the territory it's lost. So what that means is Hodges is more right, I think, than I've been willing to admit or think about, and he's right. We have to find a way to get NATO to up its game. If you think Ukraine can win in its current status, not only do I see difficulty making that claim, but then there is no serious urgency to get NATO to up it, because we're just talking about how much they're going to win by and how quickly. If you think that they're not going to be able to have a 100% victory without NATO upping its commitment, then NATO upping its commitment is no longer this hypothetical where we sit and bitch and moan about it. It's something we actively have to work for very, very fucking hard. And the difference between those two positions is an accurate understanding of where Ukraine is. So while it's hard to reach the conclusions I'm reaching, I think it's in the end beneficial, because it means we now have enough information to know how to approach this and what the real problem is. And I think the real problem is that NATO can't just keep its support levels. It has to up them, and I suspect NATO doesn't want to. So the real problem is, how do you sell that Russia has to lose this? That's a good question, and I don't know. But from what I'm looking at, I don't think I don't think 100% expulsion is tenable at the current rate. And I think the notion that Russia really only has Ukraine only has about a year left that they can keep throwing the forces into it that they've been doing, that strikes me as accurate. And I think it's worth understanding that as a problem. No other way to fix it if you don't understand it. So that's it. And it's not. I'm not pleased to have to report that because I love Starsky. The more I've learned about Ukraine, the more I love it, and the more I've met Ukrainians. I'm just like, and I'd met some before, and I was just like, they're fine people or whatnot. But I've come to have a profound appreciation for that country and for the heart of its people. So that's, I think, where we are. So we have a lot to talk to Hodges about. We're going to have Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, former number 2 guy at NATO. He was the head of, he was Supreme Commander of all NATO ground forces worldwide. He was also the former head of all U.S. forces in Europe. We're going to have him on. And I think the last discussion was good. I enjoyed it. I think it was a serious discussion, and he enjoyed it enough. He agreed to come back twice. So, but I think this next one is going to have to be a much more serious and frank discussion about how and why NATO has not been giving the support it needs to give, and what realistically the consequences are if they don't, and then how to change that, because I think those are the only questions on the table at this point. Any other final thoughts, Isandring?
Time's going to be able to tell exactly what the policies are that they may not be upfront and honest with. The only thing that I can kind of figure is they were kind of hoping for Ukraine to outperform Russia spectacularly. It's not too difficult to outperform them militarily, but the levels at which they have to consistently outperform, given the personnel disparity and the fact that they're dependent upon the West resupplying them with all of the infrastructure targeting that Russia has done, trying to produce food and electricity and just keep functioning is very difficult. The longer it goes on, the worse it gets for Ukraine. There's got to be some high level think tank or advisory panel that's going, we don't want a definitive crushing defeat of Russia, because that could push, because they're nuclear armed power, and like I said, it's like Russia may not be able to win, but they can make everybody lose. So maybe they're thinking that we should really think twice about making Russia lose, with no way of pointing out, hey, we won in this aspect at least. And I understand the position of the Ukrainians, and I don't blame them as one bit for going, hey, wait a minute, we were the ones invaded. Of course, we don't want a negotiated settlement. We want to win this. They should be kicked out, and definitively so. So it's like, I understand their viewpoint, but of course, when you start dealing, if you're not completely,
let's make one minor adjustment. It's not a viewpoint; it's the truth. They should be kicked out, whether or not that's practical or not, for all the reasons you've mentioned. It's not a viewpoint. That is, they are correct.
Oh yeah, it's like I understand that. I understand them and agree with them. So
but yeah,
that's the only thing I can think of is that they're just too concerned about making Russia lose badly enough that they'd be willing to make everybody lose with them, and that's the only thing I can keep coming back to. And of course, with the condition of all of the rest of their military equipment, I'm not even sure if they decided to push the big red button that anything would happen. I mean, their military equipment is so degraded. I can't imagine that their nuclear arsenal is any better. But that's still, you only need one to work.
Well, and Hodges has talked a lot about that too, so I think we're going to have to ask him, what is really the threat? Let's assume NATO goes all in on Ukraine. What's really the likely outcome? So we're going to ask him about that. You had said something else too that I really like, which is the reality is, so far the war has not cost Russia much. As long as it doesn't cost them anything, there's no motivation to stop. It's only the strikes that Ukraine has been doing inside Russia, the strikes around Moscow, that have any shot. And especially if NATO is not going to fully commit, then Ukraine really has only one solution at this point that I can see, because they will lose a war of attrition, period, end of discussion. They will. They will. Russia has too many troops it's willing to throw at the problem, and the losses are still too high, and they have been too high. Ukraine will run out of men. They cannot produce men faster than Russia can kill them. So unless they can change those ratios, and they can't change those ratios significantly without help from NATO. So if NATO is not going to help, the only real way that I see for Ukraine to make a significant impact in the war is to keep up the strikes in Russia, because that threatens the Putin regime, that threatens to overturn things, and that with any luck, Putin gets kicked out and his replacement says we shouldn't be there and bails. So that is, without the support of NATO, that is the only path to victory I see. I don't see another one. So does that make? And again, I'm gonna ask. Listen, and I hope I'm wrong, and I'm gonna ask all of these questions to Hodges, and we'll see what he has to say. But what are your thoughts?
We're amateur strategists, armchair quarterbacking this.
We are. Yep.
That is the really. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to win a defensive war. You know, if all you're doing is trying to defend yourself, and you're not applying any kind of offensive pressure towards the enemy, why would the enemy decide to stop? I mean, the only way that you can win that kind of war is if you can chew up their own troops at such a significantly higher rate that it just doesn't make sense for them anymore to throw troops at it. But again, we've stated several times, they don't have to throw troops at it. They could pull all their troops out of Ukraine and just continue to shell the heck out of Ukraine and win the war that way. You know, so it's can get really difficult, you know, and they're trying their best to hit places like Moscow to take the war to them, because that's the only way you're going to really change their minds, is to inflict more damage upon them that they don't have control over. And unfortunately, that's kind of sort of the one thing that NATO has said, well, we're not going to give you the weaponry to do. So I don't know how effective that's going to be. So you've got this conundrum of, this is the way that we, in the war favorably, we actually win, and yet we don't really have the ability to do this. So we're stuck in this quagmire of fighting a defensive war, and it's literally turning into a war of attrition, which is terrible for Ukraine. So I would really like to get the general's take on that and see if our thinking is in alignment there, because that's the way it looks to me too.
Well, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm not just saying this out of the blue. We've been keeping an eye on this for a while, and we've been talking to a lot of people, and my understanding, I prefer Lance speak for himself, but my understanding is that's pretty much his view too, and that actually dovetails with a lot of what Hodges has been saying. If you look at everything below the bullet points, the bullet points are NATO is not supporting Ukraine enough, and NATO has to go all in, and NATO has to not be NATO has to not be for Ukraine not losing. They have to be for Ukraine winning, and you hear him talk about this time and time and time again. But if you look at why, and if you look at what he's saying, he seems to strongly imply that without that, Ukraine will not be able to pull off a complete victory. So I think there's some difficult conversations that have to be had. And again, good, because when you have them, you can sit there and figure out what's next. How do we get Ukraine what it needs? Because it's becoming more and more clear that it needs it much more than we've been thinking about or talking about. We've been talking about how awesome Ukraine has been doing and how awesome the victories are, and that's all true. But what's more important is NATO has to step up. And so we have to, the new conversation is going to have to be, what do we do to do that? And I think the reason we have to be for that is because I think they won't be able to complete a complete victory without it. All right. But there was a thing.
There's further uncertainty to this as well.
Please.
There's a further uncertainty because, the right in the country, bizarrely, is anti-war in this case. We have a national election coming up. So it's like who wins is going to determine whether, the U.S. is going to support any of this anymore at all. I mean, if the U.S. stops sending any kind of aid whatsoever and just says, look, no, we're done. They need to settle this. It's a regional conflict. All the things that many on the right have been talking about. We shouldn't be putting our money into this. We should be spending our money here at home where we have some significant issues to address, which isn't necessarily false either. That adds an entirely new level of uncertainty to all of this as well. And it's like, so now you've got kind of shaky ground and trying to make difficult decisions when you can't really predict what's going to happen into the future. It makes the whole thing very difficult.
Yvonne has said, destroy the Kerch Bridge. Here's the problem with that, which is that bridge is really important to Ukraine. The reason that bridge is important to Ukraine, at least right now, is because it's the only way that the troops in Crimea can get out. The hope, I think, was to reach Crimea by this point, and obviously they failed to breach the Russian lines in any significant way. The goal was to reach Crimea by this point. If the Ukrainian army reaches Crimea, the soldiers in Crimea have two options. They can defend Crimea. The Russian soldiers in Crimea have two options. They can defend Crimea or they can flee. Fleeing is probably preferable because for the most part, and this is one of the things that Ben Hodges had said, was everybody who's ever attempted to defend Crimea has failed. It's actually really hard to defend. So you want them to be able to flee. They will almost certainly flee. They will leave. If they can't leave, now you've got a very big problem. You could just encircle it and declare them all enemy POWs, but now you need to get food in there. You need to get water in there. You need to get other supplies in there because you've got civilians in there and the military is going to be pilfering all of the civilian supplies so they can live. This is a Russian military. They don't care about the civilians there. The ideal situation is to get them out, and you cannot do that if you destroy the bridge. That's why the bridge hasn't been... They can learn to swim. No, they can't. These are Russians we're talking about. We've seen them try to swim before. It's had disastrous results. So I appreciate your optimism, but so anyways, unless Ukraine wants to starve the soldiers, unless they want to starve out the soldiers in Crimea, they want those guys to be able to get out. And it just makes taking Crimea 10 times easier. You destroy the bridge, you've got a real problem, and you've got a potential humanitarian crisis on your hands if the soldiers stay and decide either to fight and because there's no other option, or they surrender, but you still got the problem where you're going to put them all. The best thing you can do is turn it into the world's largest POW camp, but you now have to feed them and take care of them, and it becomes a huge fucking nightmare. Even if they all surrender, it's a huge nightmare. The best possible situation is they all get out as soon as the Ukrainians just get the fuck out. And then you can shelter your own civilians, you can provide, and then you can start to bolster up defenses in Crimea. You can't do any of that if that bridge goes down. That bridge has to stay up. That's why they haven't destroyed it. That's why they're unlikely to destroy it unless they reach if they destroy that bridge, they've reached the conclusion that they're not going to get to Crimea. And if you're not going to get to Crimea, destroying that bridge is really important. It helps. It reduces the supplies. It helps demoralize them. It's a huge symbolic win. That's a great bridge to destroy if you don't think you're going to get to Crimea. If you think you as the Ukrainian army are going to get to Crimea, don't destroy the bridge. Damage it. You have to allow people to be able to leave. For your own sake. So, all right, that's where we are. So again, for those of you just joining us, we have a preview of the indictment against Donald Trump. This document was published by the Fulton County court website. It is not an actual indictment document. It looks to be a preparatory document of some kind. It is only 2 pages, but we believe that this is what the charges are that they're expecting. This, again, is directly from the Fulton County courthouse. This was published by their web team. It was taken down almost immediately. Reuters picked up on it. Dorito gave it to us, so we've got it here. It's legit in that sense. It has the filing date as today. The date of birth has not been filled out, so it looks like it's still a document in the works. And again, this isn't the actual charging document. It would look somewhat different from this, but it does appear to be a summary of what the charges they're expecting. It includes a violation of Georgia RICO Act, solicitation of violation of an oath by a public officer, conspiracy to commit impersonating a public officer, conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree, conspiracy to commit filing false documents, forgery in the first degree again, conspiracy to commit false statements and writings, filing false documents, solicitation of violation of an oath of a public officer, and any number of. So this document was published by the Fulton County Courthouse today. We believe that it's a reasonably accurate representation of, let me rephrase that. We believe that this is what the Fulton County DA is expecting is going to be returned. We don't believe that these have been returned yet. We also do know that they have not been filed yet. This is not a filing document either. So we believe that there are still 2 witnesses left to testify. The former lieutenant governor testifying tomorrow. But at this point, and just so for those of you unfamiliar with grand juries, you usually have a pretty good idea of the prosecutor always has somebody sitting in the room right next to him whose job it is to watch the jury and try to get a feel for whether or not the jury's buying what you're selling. Losing a grand jury indictment is humiliating, so they always put in enough evidence to basically secure an indictment. An indictment's a reasonably low bar anyway, so it isn't hard to do. So for the most part, DAs are very aware of what charges are going to stick and what the grand jury is going to return. It's not usually a surprise. They don't put everything in the grand jury because they don't want to tip their hand to the prosecution when the documents become public, but they will have to eventually anyway, and the reality is they will always want to make sure they clear that hurdle because it's really bad if they don't. So this appears to be what they believe they're going to get. And again, was put up by the Fulton County Courthouse about an hour and a half ago, and then immediately taken down. The courthouse has made only one statement regarding this, which is that no charges have been filed. That's all they've said. So they haven't denied that this was accurate or an accurate document. Again, this comes from Reuters. So we have high confidence that this is accurate for what it is. It's not an indictment document, but we believe that it is a document of what the DA believes they're going to get. I'd be surprised if any of these had actually been returned yet, because our understanding is the jury is still out. So that's it. So we're very happy to be able to offer that document to you now. It is also on our Discord in case you wish to check it out. Thank you all for joining us. Isandring, any final thoughts before we go?
I'm hoping that the outlook is a lot better than it can seem. There's lots of times where things seem to be going really badly and then something changes. So it's always a dynamic situation.
Good point.
I hope for the best of things, and as the saying goes, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, let God do the rest. If you believe in God, and that's about all we can do.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. And that's something I often forget, and I in particular tend towards splitting behavior, which is to say, when Ukraine is doing really well, I'm like, Ukraine's going to win this war 100%. We're all, everybody knows it, and they're way, yay. And then as soon as there's a setback, I'm like, oh my God, Ukraine's going to lose. So, and like I said, it's not quite that simple in this case. We've been having special teams discussions on this with people who are qualified to know, and there is definitely cause for concern. But having said that, you're absolutely right. So I appreciate you ending on that note, which is things can change. And if they couldn't, there'd be no point in fighting the war. So we all know they can, and that's the goal. So thank you so much. Thank you for that super chat earlier. We appreciate it. And as I said in the beginning, we're an independent news organization, and we like staying that way. And the only reason we can stay that way is because we don't have to worry about monetization. We don't have to, well, we do, but our supporters make it so we don't have to as much as we would otherwise, because we get super chats and we get patrons. So thank you all for your support. That's really the only way we can do this. So thank you guys very much. And we look forward to seeing you with Commander Lance McMillan on Downtime Thursday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We're certainly going to be talking about this. Also with hopefully with Operator Starsky on Friday. And then in 2 weeks, we will have 2 shows on Monday and Wednesday with Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, and we are going to ask him some tough questions and see what he has to say about NATO's response or lack thereof. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you guys on either when there's an indictment or on Thursday, whichever comes first. Have a good night.